All right, everybody, what's going on? And welcome to today's edition of SWAC Talk, the show we cover the SWAC inside and out. I am your tour guide around the SWAC Seawells, coming at you, and we are getting ready for week 4. We are already 4 weeks into the regular season, 5 if you count week 0. So we are almost through the first month of football. We got one more weekend in September. The season is already flying by, and for some of our teams, it's looking a little rocky. For some teams, it's looking pretty good. So we're going to talk about all the games that are taking place on Saturday. Kind of give you an idea of what my thoughts are on these games, and I'll give my winners on these games. Um, like Week 4 pick'em is active, so make sure y'all hit the link, which will be in the description. It's also a pinned tweet on my Twitter, which is Swag Talk 76. Also, it's on my Facebook and Instagram, which are both Swag Talk. So make sure you get in on that. We have pretty good participation right now, man. We're averaging like 14 to 15 people a week, so I think that's a pretty solid number, and it's been pretty steady. We had a lot of consistent people, and we have a pretty solid group of contenders. So at the end of the season, after the Celebration Bowl, if we got to do tiebreakers or how we're gonna figure it out. The winner will get a championship belt. So it's not too late to get in. If you want to get in, maybe you can play some catch up and make a run to the championship. Also, don't forget to like the video, comment, and share, and hit the subscribe button. Help us try to get to 1,500 subs. We definitely appreciate it. We're going to continue to do what we do and earn your subscription. So with that being said, y'all make sure y'all check us out every week. We have SWAC Talk on Wednesdays with our weekly previews. Sunday is our weekly recaps. And Thursday is SWAC Smoke, live 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. And then you never know, we might have a live like we did after Saturday's game. So hit that notification bell so you'll be alerted to when those kind of videos drop. You never know when we might go live or anything like that. So definitely keep it locked with us and keep it on. So let's go ahead and jump into this. We got a pretty full slate on the docket. Pretty much everybody's in action except for, I think, Alabama State's the only team that's off this week, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot of football to be played this week, and we're gonna start off with the first game of the day, which is Bethune-Cookman hosting Clark Atlanta University. That game is a 2 p.m. Eastern time kickoff, 1 p.m. Central. That is on HBCU Go. So if you want to check that game out, you'll be able to watch it. These two teams come in kind of going in different directions for different reasons. Bethune-Cookman comes in at 0-3. Clark Atlanta comes in at 2-0-1. I know they don't do ties anymore in college football, but Bethune-Cookman but Clark Atlanta's game against Florida Memorial on Saturday was suspended at half due to weather. Game was tied at 28. So both teams they ruled it a tie. So that's why they're listed as 2-0-1. But other than that, they have done pretty well. Like I said, they're 2-0 in other games. So they've been playing pretty solid. We're gonna kind of take a look at what the Panthers have and what they bring to the table as they attempt to pull off an upset over Bethune-Cookman. Clark Atlanta, they had a couple close victories. They beat Fort Valley State by 3 points at the beginning of the season, 45-42. And then they beat Allen 26-22 on September 7th. Before that game, that was suspended at half, 28-28. So they have scored points in pretty much every game, giving up a lot of points, but they've scored points as well. When you look at this team, they're averaging 33 points per game. They're giving up 30 points per game. They average 77.7 yards per game on the ground, 3.1 yards per carry. They have 1 rushing touchdown. They're giving up 85.3 yards per game on the ground, 3.3 yards per carry, and 7 touchdowns. Through the air, they are 60 of 105, 10 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 942 yards, average 314 yards per game through the air, 252 through the air for the opponents, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Total offense, the Panthers 391.7 yards per game. They average 5.6 yards per play, and they have 13 total touchdowns. The opponents also have 13 total touchdowns, and they average 337.7 yards per game and 6.4 yards per play. Third down conversions, the Panthers are at 45%, the opponents 44%. Panthers 40% on fourth down, opponents 25%. Both teams, them and their opponents both have lost 2 fumbles, and they have 4 sacks as a defense. The opponents have 3. Individually, some names to look out for. Trayvon Pender is the leading rusher. He has 29 carries for 86 yards, average 3 yards per carry, no touchdowns. Through the air, David Wright III, he's 38 of 58 passing, 661 yards, 9 touchdowns, and no interceptions, completed 65% of his passes. And when he goes to the air, his top target is Jamal Jones. He has 17 catches for 255 yards and 1 touchdown. Amani Harris has 14 catches for 232 yards and 4 touchdowns. Also, Ronnie West has 9 catches for 123 yards and a touchdown. Defensively, Solomon Morley leads the defense with 20 tackles. The top tackle for loss guy is Jaden Cleveland. He has 3, along with Curtis Wade. He also has 3, and Jaden Cleveland has 3, and Caleb Pierce has 3. So they have quite a few guys with tackles for loss. The defense has 26.5 total tackles for loss on the season. They also have 6 sacks as a defense, led by Cleveland with 2, and interceptions. The Hill Wilkins has 2. So as you can see, they have a pretty solid defense. Now they give up a lot of yards and points, but they've been able to make the stops that they need in games that can come back to bite you in a game like this if Bethune-Cookman offensively can make some things happen. I do think one area that Bethune-Cookman has a huge advantage in is the return game. Darnell Dees returned 2 kickoffs for touchdowns against Western Michigan last week. So that's definitely a guy that could break one at any point in a game like this. Definitely could be a game changer in a game like this. Offensively, Bethune-Cookman had their best point production output of the season, scoring 31 points. But like I said, 12, or however you want to call it, 2 touchdowns worth of those points came from special teams. But they still scored. They still scored fairly well in this game against Western Michigan, which was their best outing in terms of points all season. Still only averaging 12 points per game on offense, giving up 46. That is with 2 FBS games. Just want to throw that out there. They're averaging they're averaging 72 yards per game on the ground, 1.9 yards per carry, and 2 touchdowns. Opponents 280 yards per game on the ground, 11 touchdowns, 6.2 yards per carry, 125 yards through the air, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Opponents 240 yards through the air, 7 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Total offense 197 yards per game for the Wildcats, 3.1 yards per play, and 4 touchdowns. The opponents 7.7 yards per play. They average 521 yards per game and 18 total touchdowns. Bethune-Cookman is only completing 13% on third down. No matter what level you're playing, that's just not going to get it done. They are 3 or 4 on fourth down, 75%. They do have 8 sacks as a defense, and opponents convert 42% on third down and 40% on fourth down, and they have 10 sacks. So they've done a decent job with getting pressure on quarterbacks. Even when you consider the opponents that they played, that's still pretty good. That's almost 3 sacks per game, even against 2 FBS opponents and a solid FCS opponent. So they've given up a lot of yardage and a lot of points, but they have made some plays here and there. The offense has just put them in bad positions all game long, not being able to really move the ball. Courtney Reese leads the offense with 31 carries for 70 yards. Cam Ransom is the leading passer right now. He's 38 of 62 for 338 yards, 338 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Leading receiver is Lorenzo Jenkins. He has 6 catches for 97 yards, averaging 16.1 yard per catch. Also, Marcus Velez has 6 catches, which actually leads the team, tied for the team lead. He also has 32 yards in receiving. Malik Huggins has 4 catches for 52 yards as well. Defensively, Raymond Woody III leads the defense with 26 tackles. E.K. Brown has 2.5 tackles for loss. This defense has 12 total tackles for loss. The offense has given up 38 tackles for loss. So they've really, been playing long down and distance all year long. So offensively, they just haven't really been able to get anything going. And Brown also leads the team in sacks with 2. And interceptions go to Woody and Volmar. They each have 1. Like I said, this offense, it has to get going. And I think a game like this could be the spark they need. They don't have, Bethune-Cookman doesn't have a lot of explosive plays. Their longest run is 50 yards. Their next longest is 44. After that is like 27 and 25. So those are their longest passes. Their longest runs have not been very explosive. Their longest run on the season is 23 yards. So they haven't really hit the big play on the ground. And, it's not through lack of effort because they run the ball 114 times, but they just haven't been able to have any success. And I think in a game like this, and I've said it all year really, Bethune-Cookman needs to be able to run the football. And in a game like this, whether it's with your quarterback, with his legs or, jet sweeps or something, I think you have to find some kind of way to generate a run game in this game. And I'm not saying necessarily just grind it out, but I think you really need to be able to run the ball. A, to give your defense time to rest, and B, when you establish a level of physicality against a lower division team, you can wear that defense down, and that opens up more for you. And like I said, I expect Bethune-Cookman to have some big plays in all phases. I think the defense is going to play well. I think the offense is going to come alive in this game, and I think special teams are gonna make some big plays. So I like Bethune-Cookman in this game. I think they're gonna score a decent amount of points here. Like I said, Clark has given up points in every game they played, so I don't see this game being any different. I like Bethune-Cookman in this game, 38 to 18, because I do think Clark's passing game will make for some interesting situations for Bethune-Cookman on defense. But I think the Wildcats get it done here. I think they thrive in this game, and that kind of gives them a boost as they head into conference play next week at home against Alabama State. So they need some positivity here to kind of get themselves going right, and I think they get it. That takes us to our next game, which is an FBS game. I think this is the only FBS game on the schedule this week, and that's Florida A&M heading to Troy to take on the Trojans. This is 6 o'clock kickoff Eastern time, 5 p.m. Central time. Starting with the Trojans, historically they've been a program that that has been very solid. They've had their ups and downs the last few years, but they're always going to be a team who can cause problems for some teams. And they've had their moments at times. This season, not so much because they're 0-3 coming into this game. They lost to Nevada 28-26. They lost to Memphis 38-17. And they lost to Iowa 38-21. And when you give up 38 points to Iowa, that kind of says a little bit because they offensively have not been good the last few years. The Trojans averaged 21.3 points per game. They're giving up 34.6. They average 105 yards per game on the ground, 3.5 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns. The opponent's 236 yards per game on the ground, 6.6 yards per carry, and 9 touchdowns. They average 193 yards per game through the air, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. The opponent's 172.6 yards per game, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Total offense, 298 yards per game for the Trojans, 5.2 yards per play, and 8 total touchdowns. The opponent's 409 yards per game, 6.7 yards per play, 14 total touchdowns. Troy converts 51% on third down, which is very, very good, especially for a team that hasn't won a game. Their offense has been pretty efficient on third down. You gotta wonder where the disconnect is, and opponents convert 54%. So that shows you the defense just cannot get off the field. Troy is 100% on fourth down, 2 for 2. Opponents haven't converted one. Troy has lost one fumble. The opponents have lost none. So they have not forced a turnover yet. So defense not being able to force turnovers and not being able to get off the field on third down equals to some long games. And that's pretty much, I think the offense hasn't been great. When you look at the numbers, they are, kind of middling to average. But the defense has really been bad on the ground, and the fact that they can't force turnovers really has hampered them. They only have 2 sacks as a defense, and they've given up 6. So, like I said, defense is probably the biggest issue that you see with Troy, even though the offense is not great either. But Damian Taylor is the leader in rushing. He has 25 carries, 156 yards, 1 touchdown, averages 6.2 yards per carry. When they go to the air, they have 2 quarterbacks that are kind of going at it. Matthew Caldwell is 25 of 40 for 269 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and Goose Crowder is 25 of 37, 238 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception. 1 touchdown, no interception, excuse me. Receiving, the leading receiver is Devontae Ross. He has 15 catches for 272 yards and 3 touchdowns, averages 18.1 yards per catch. He has a 63-yard as his long. Peyton Higgins has 12 catches for 91 yards. They also have 3 other guys that have caught at least 5 passes. So they kind of spread it around a bit, but Ross and Higgins are their 2 main guys in the passing game. When you look at the defense, Brendan Jackson leads the team with 23 tackles. Also, Jordan Stringer has 21 tackles for loss. Jackson has 3 to lead the defense, along with Philip Lee. This defense has 15 tackles for loss. The opponents are 21. So, like I said, they've really struggled just on the line. They've really struggled protecting the quarterback and opening holes for the running game. They do have 2 sacks, like I said. Stringer has 1, and the other one is to Julian Peterson. And the opponents have 6 sacks, no interceptions, because, like I said, they haven't turned the ball over. They haven't forced any turnovers at all. So, that's a very, very sore spot for them in a game like this. They are 3 of 3 on field goals with a long of 30, so they haven't really established any long range on their kicks. Their return game, they do have a 77-yard punt return for a touchdown by Devontae Ross. So you definitely want to look out for that guy in the return game. Jordan Lovett averages 15.2 yards on kickoff returns. So they've only returned 2 punts, and one of them went for a touchdown. You always want to, be mindful of guys that can break long returns, because those are the kind of yardage and plays that can change the tide in a game like this. But FAMU they've been playing, kind of up and down. They've won the games, that they need to win. And, of course, they lost Miami 2 weeks ago. They're averaging 18.3 points per game. They're giving up 32.2. They're rushing for 100.7 yards per game. They're giving up 202 per game. They average 3.6 yards per carry. And they allow 5.2 yards per carry. Through the air, 235 yards per game, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. The opponents, 199 yards per game, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Total offense, FAMU, 336 yards per game, 5.5 yards per play, 6 touchdowns. Opponents, 401 yards per game, 12 touchdowns, 6.5 yards per play. FAMU is converting 44% on third down and 100% on fourth down. They have 6 sacks as a defense. The opponents also have 6 sacks. The opponents have not converted a fourth down, and they're converting 51% on third down. So all those numbers, especially on the defensive side of the ball, are very different from last season, which is to be expected. But that's still such a huge difference. Especially the run defense. It's kind of been hit or miss. They get kind of gashed early, then they kind of lock in, but they've been giving up big yardage and big runs in all of the games. I would expect Troy to try to exploit that. I don't think Troy is going to try to come out and throw it around, because I think they need to keep that defense off the field as much as they can, because the defense has been extremely porous. FAMU's passing offense could be able to cause some issues, but FAMU just has to be able to play a clean game in this game. Kelvin Dean is the leading rusher. He has 99 yards on 20 carries, 5 yards per carry, no touchdowns. Daniel Richardson, 58 of 85, 699 yards, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception. The leading receiver right now, Jamari Gassett. He has 14 catches for 175 yards and 2 touchdowns. Also, Kobe Gross has 11 catches for 166 yards and 1 touchdown. They spread the ball around a lot. They have quite a few guys with at least 3 catches. Defensively, they're led by Deco Wilson with 21 tackles for loss. Michael Opong leads the team with 3 tackles for loss and sacks. James Gardner Jr. leads with 1.5 interceptions. They haven't registered one yet. This defense is still making some plays in the backfield. They do have 14 tackles for loss. They've given up 15, and like I said, they have 6 sacks as a defense. But I expect Troy to to take care of business in the game. I think FAMU's gonna be competitive, but I think Troy wins this game. I'm gonna say 35-17. I think it might be a close game early, but I think Troy hit a couple more plays. Third game of the evening, and that's Central Arkansas Bears taking on the Golden Lions of UAPB. Pine Bluff has had an interesting season. When you kind of look at it, they won the game that they were supposed to, and they kind of lost the games that they were supposed to. They scored a decent amount of points against Tennessee State. Obviously got shut out against Arkansas, but they put up 73 against Arkansas Baptist. So they have been playing okay these last 2 weeks. Makai Higgins has had a couple of big games. He was the SWAC Offensive Player of the Week this past week. So that's always something to carry ahead. That's an honor that nobody from Pine Bluff has gotten in recent years. So just the ability to kind of have that, and the offense has kind of been looking sharp. I think they have a reason to be opportunistic and optimistic. That's the word I was looking for. They have a chance to be optimistic heading into these games, but this is a different beast that they're taking on in Central Arkansas. The Bears have been playing extremely well. They have a lot of talent on their team, and when you look at this team, they average 36. They average 36 points per game. They're giving up 21. They're averaging 255 yards per game on the ground. They're giving up 120. They average 6.8 yards per carry, and they have 11 rushing touchdowns. They have given up 3.5 yards per carry and 4 touchdowns on the ground. 216 yards through the air for the Bears. 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Opponents 228 yards per game through the air. 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Total offense 471 yards per game. 7.5 yards per play. The opponents 349 yards per game, 4.9 yards per play. They convert third down. I hate these. They convert 37% on third down. The opponents also 37%. 50% on fourth down. The opponents 40%. They have 15 sacks as a defense, so they've been extremely extremely consistent in getting pressure on the quarterback. They've given up 5 sacks as a defense. I mean, as offense, they've given up 5 sacks. So they've done a good job of getting pressure, and they've done a pretty decent job of protecting the quarterback. They are, like I said, they've had some pretty competitive games. I mean, they hung in there with Arkansas State, and then they won the other 2 games. So they have had, they've had their moments, and they're going to be a tough team to beat. When you look at their leading defensive player, I'm going to kill his name, but Jack Benesh, I think that's right. He has 28 tackles on the season. David Walker has 8.5 tackles for loss and 5.5 sacks. I know that guy is probably going to be a contender for the Buck Buchanan Award. He has 14 tackles on his own. His defense has 22 tackles for loss. The opponents have made some plays in the backfield as well. So they've had their moments, but they just haven't really been able to get much going now. Like I said, they have 15 sacks as a defense, led by Walker with 5.5, and they have 2 interceptions from James Jordan and Dylan Land. When you look at the rest, I hate these PDF statistic sheets. Derek Powell, they've been saying he's a guy who can be a big time player in FCS, on the FCS level. Has 475 yards rushing, 8.5 yards per carry, and 6 touchdowns. Has a longer 81. The leading passer is Will McKelvin. He is 48 of 74, 64.9%, 619 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. When he goes to the air, Cam Robinson has 12 catches for 141 yards. Also, Powell has 8 catches for 156 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, that's a guy you're going to have to definitely be aware of where he is at all times, because he's a guy who can do it on both in the run game and the pass game. So if you lose track of him, he's going to burn you. He also has a 69-yard reception. So he's a guy who is going to be a big play waiting to happen. When you look at Pine Bluff, this team comes in at 1-2, but they've been playing pretty well these last 2 weeks. Like I said, we didn't really know what to make of this team against Arkansas Baptist, but I thought they competed against Tennessee State. They had some rough patches, and it ultimately bit them. But they lost their game 41-28. But this team has scored. They've scored a good bit of points the last 2 weeks, which is something that you can't really say for Pine Bluff. In recent years, they scored 101 points in those 2 games. So they're averaging 33 points per game. They're giving up 37 on the ground. They're averaging 126 yards per game with 9 touchdowns, 4.1 yards per carry, 5.6 yards per carry for the opponents, 184.7 yards per game on the ground, and 10 touchdowns, 249 yards passing for the Golden Lions, 5 touchdowns, and no interceptions. So they playing FBS team, a really solid Tennessee State defense, and then NAIA team, no interceptions. So they've taken kind of ball in that aspect. The opponents have 5 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. They're 239 yards per game. Total offense, 376.3 yards per game for the Golden Lions, 14 touchdowns, 6.5 yards per play, 424 yards per game for the opponents, 6.7 yards per play. They have 15 total touchdowns. 30% on third down, 50% on fourth down. They have 2 sacks as a defense. The opponents have 12 sacks, and they have converted 60% on third down. They haven't attempted a fourth down yet this season. So if there's one thing that's still hampering Pine Bluff on the offensive side of the ball, is the defense, the offensive line. They've still given up some heavy pressure, but they've been able to make plays in spite of that these last couple of weeks. O'Shawn Ross is the leading rusher. He has 26 carries for 164 yards, averages 6.3 yards per carry and 4 touchdowns. Mekhi Higgins, 41 of 76 through the air, 749 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. numbers are much better than last season, even though he was a freshman at that point. But he's starting to kind of figure some things out. And Giovanni Gibson is his go-to guy. He has 13 catches for 353 yards, averages 27 yards per catch and 2 touchdowns. He has a 60-yard pass reception, and Armani Roan has a 52-yard pass reception. So both of those guys average over 20 yards per catch. Also, Donovan Giles averages 21.2 yards per catch, and Damon Dawkins averages 18 yards per catch. So they've been able to go down the field in these last 2 weeks. And, you're going to need that, especially to kind of help your run game. And just having a consistent offense all around is going to obviously make things better for you because defensively it's still a little shaky for them. Kyle Volk leads the defense with 22 tackles. The leading guy in tackle for loss is Anais Lukeman with 4 tackles for loss. He also leads the team with 1.5 sacks. Interceptions, Amarion Mingo has 2 to lead the defense. And they just been playing more competitive football these last couple of weeks. Now this is a stiffer test than previous. Tennessee State was no slouch, but Central Arkansas is a different beast in this matter. I think this is a game where you're gonna probably see Pine Bluff have a little bit more of a tougher time. It's at home, but that's still such a tough matchup for them. I like Central Arkansas in this game because I think they have a weapon that I don't know if Pablo is going to really be able to stop on either side of the ball. They have a guy on defense who's going to generate a ton of pressure against the offensive line that's given them 12 sacks already, and then they're going to have a guy who can do it on the ground and through the air against a defense that has had their rough moments. So I think Central Arkansas wins this game. I'm going to say 42-14. I think Pine Bluff might be in this game early, but I think they kind of fall behind late, and the Bears pull it out. And Pine Bluff, they come off of this game, and then they get into SWAC play on the 28th as they take on. I know that they have a bye week next week, so they come off a bye week, and then they go into SWAC play against Alcorn. So they will be getting themselves ready to finishing up their non-conference slate here, and then they'll be good to go in terms of conference play. So we'll see how the Golden Lions do. And that takes us to our 4th game of the day, and that is Valley heading to Thibodaux to take on the Colonels of Nicholls State. This is Nicholls State first of 2 SWAC matchups. They play Southern in a couple of weeks. Valley came into that game against Murray State last week as a team that some people felt might be able to pull off one against the Racers, but it just was a disaster from the start. Kind of like the Tennessee State game, how they just fell behind big and couldn't get into it. They lost their game by a score of 59-8. And they just really could not get anything going. And they take on a Nicholls State team who comes in at 0-3. They have played 2 FBS games to open up their season, and then they lost to Sacramento State on Saturday. Nicholls is a team who is predicted to be one of the top teams in the Southland, but they're having a rough go of it right now. They lost to Louisiana Tech 25-17. They lost to LSU 44-21. In a game that they trailed by 23-20 at one point in the first half. And then Sacramento State just walloped them 34-7 on Saturday. And this is their first home game. They've been on the road the first 3 weeks of the season. And Valley's been on the road for 3 weeks. This is their 4th road game of the season before they go home next week to take on Alcorn. So let's see what the Colonels, what they've been up to. They have averaged 15 points per game. They're giving up 34.3. They're averaging 74 yards per game on the ground, which is kind of surprising for a team who has been a really strong running team. I do expect them to lean on their run game in this game. They average 2.1 yards per carry with 2 touchdowns. Opponents 107 yards per game on the ground, 3.3 yards per carry. They have 3 touchdowns. Through the air, Nichols is 148 yards per game, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 285 yards through the air for the opponents, 10 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Total offense, 222 yards for Nicholls State, 3.6 yards per play, 6 touchdowns. Opponents, 5.9 yards per play, 392 yards per game. They have 13 touchdowns. When you look at third downs, Nichols has only converted 28% on third down and 14% on fourth down. So they have not been able to drive the ball down the field at all in these games. They've given up 3 sacks. They have 3 sacks. The opponents have registered 13 sacks. So they've really struggled to protect the quarterback in these games. The opponents convert 50% on fourth down and 38% on third down. And again, they have played 2 FBS games, so take that however you want to take that. And they played a ranked FCS opponent. So their schedule has not been easy, but I don't think they've played to the level that a lot of people even expected them to play to. Colin Guggenheim leads the team with 59 carries for 279 yards, 2 touchdowns. He does have a 67-yarder, which I think he got against LSU, averaging 4.7 yards per carry. The leading passer right now is Pat McQuaid. He is 42 of 73. 412 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. His leading receiver is Quincy Brown. He has 13 catches for 170 yards and 1 touchdown. Also, Terry Matthews has 9 catches for 124 yards. And that's pretty much it as far as their guys who are kind of the guys that lean on the pass game. Eli Ennis leads the defense with 21 tackles. With 33 tackles. He has 1.5 tackles for loss. Alex Valerio has 2.5 tackles for loss and 1 sack to lead the defense. And they have 4 guys with 1 interception apiece. And they really haven't really had much else there. And like I said, they've been, on a tough slide. Valley's been on a tough slide. Valley obviously plays that tough non-conference schedule every year pretty much, and all on the road. Very few home games early in the season, and they're on their 4th straight road game. The Delta Devils average 14.3 points per game. They're giving up 42. They average 66 yards per game on the ground, 1.7 yards per carry, and 1 touchdown. Giving up 193 yards per game on the ground, 7 touchdowns, 5.2 yards per carry. The opponents average 264 yards per game through the air, 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Valley, 188 yards per game, 5 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. Total offense, Valley, 254 yards per game, 6 touchdowns, 3.7 yards per play. The opponents, 457 yards per game, 6.9 yards per play, 17 touchdowns. Valley's converting 37% on third down, 50% on fourth down, and they have 3 sacks. The opponents have 10 sacks, 3 or 4 on fourth down for 75% and 54% on third down. Valley just has not been able to get stops in games. Tajarian Williams is the leading rusher with 48 yards on the ground on 32 carries. Also, Zamarion Kendall has 25 carries for 41 yards. Jacoby Thomas has the only rushing touchdown for Valley on the season. Jaden Sisk is the leading passer, 28 of 50, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 315 yards. Nathan Rembert and Carrick Ross have kind of been a nice 1-2 punch for Valley. Rembert has 20 catches for 225 yards and 1 touchdown. And Ross has 13 catches for 171 yards and 3 touchdowns. Defensively, Jordan Montgomery leads the defense with 17 tackles. Donovan Parham, 2.5 tackles for loss and 2 sacks to lead the defense. And Eric Campbell and Raphael Marshall each have 1 interception. This is going to be another tough test for Valley. I honestly don't know how good Nichols is this year. Like I said, they had a tough start to their season. But I think they'll be able to run the ball in this game. They're going to try to run it a lot. And I think Valley's offense has not really had a lot of production. And their defense has been, they've had their moments, especially against Lamar, but the other 2 games, they've given up a lot of points and yardage early and have been out of those games early. I think this is probably going to be a similar game where Nichols kind of gets up early and just grinds that ball and grinds that clock out. I like Nichols by a score of 47-7. Valley just, they just haven't really had it. They do get Alcorn at home next week to open up SWAC play, so that they can survive this non-conference slate without any major injuries. They can put themselves in a better position in conference play. And that takes us to our next game, and that's the Bulldogs of Alabama A&M taking on the Governors of Austin Peay. Alabama A&M had a game against Georgetown, Kentucky that was a lot closer, really a lot closer on the scoreboard than it was on the stat sheet, which, obviously games aren't played on the stat sheet, but they had a really good game moving the ball. They just couldn't really score. And they're going to have to find a way to consistently generate those points because you're hitting the tougher portion of your schedule as you start to head into SWAC play. And your schedule didn't really do you any favors. You had an FBS game and then 2 sub D1 games. So, this is your first FCS matchup coming at week 4. Austin Peay has not, they have not won a game yet. They lost to Louisville 62-0. They lost to Southern Illinois 31-17. And then they lost to Central Arkansas 45-17. So they've been basically blown out in all 3 of their games. So if you're A&M, maybe this can help you out a little bit. They're averaging 11 points per game, and they're giving up 46. The Governors average 77.7 yards per game on the ground, 2.3 yards per carry, 1 touchdown. The opponent's 7.2 yards per carry, 271 yards per game, 9 touchdowns. They are completing 183 yards per game through the air, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Opponents 189 yards per game through the air, 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Total offense 261 yards for the Governors, 4.1 yards per play, 4 touchdowns. The opponents 461 yards per game, 7 yards per play, 18 touchdowns. Austin Peay converts 32% on 3rd down and 20% on 4th down. They have 4 sacks as a defense. They've lost 3 fumbles. The opponents 21 sacks. They've been just totally mauled on the deep offensive line in terms of protecting the quarterback. The opponents 44% on 3rd down and no 4th down conversions. Individually, the Governors are led by Lavelle Wright. He has 26 carries, 109 yards, averages 4.2 yards per carry. Austin Smith is 50 of 79 passing for 504 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Ramon Copeland has 14 catches for 184 yards and 1 touchdown. Also, Jaden Barnes has 9 catches for 159 yards and 2 touchdowns. Malik Bowen Sims has 9 catches for 67 yards as well. Defensively, Jaden Lyles leads the team with 30 tackles. Ellis Jr. has 4 tackles for loss. I guess that's right. Davion Hood has 1.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, and defensively, Sammy Anderson has 2 interceptions. This offense is giving up 37 tackles for loss. So teams have been living in that backfield all year long. A&M, they come into this game at 2-1 again. They play 2 sub D1 games and an FBS game. They're averaging 25 points per game. They're giving up 32. They're averaging 184 yards per game on the ground, 87 for the opponents. 5 yards per carry for the Bulldogs, 4 yards per carry for the opponents. Bulldogs 286 yards per game through the air, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. 292 yards per game through the air for the opponents, 8 touchdowns and 1 interception. 471 yards of total offense for the Bulldogs, 6.5 yards per play, 10 touchdowns, 379 yards per game for the opponents, 7.1 yards per play, and 12 touchdowns. A&M is converting 47% on 3rd down, 50% on 4th down, and they have 6 sacks. The opponents also have 6 sacks, and they've converted 44% on 3rd down, and they haven't converted a 4th down yet. In the individual, Donovan Eaglin has 37 carries for 193 yards and 1 touchdown. Ryan Morrow has 20 carries for 160 yards per game, 160 yards, averages 8 yards per carry. So that's, their 1-2 punch from last year is back. It'd be great to see them both kind of make some things happen in this game. Cornelius Brown, 40 of 71, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 579 yards to lead the team. When they go to the air, Duke Miller has been the guy for them this season. He has 16 catches for 266 yards and 2 touchdowns. Also, Keenan Hambrick has 6 for 122. Jacoby Hewitt, who was also one of their top guys from last season, has 7 for 67 and a touchdown. Cortez Andrews leads the defense with 26 tackles. He also leads with 5.5 tackles for loss and 3.5 sacks. He's been the guy all around on his team. And then interceptions, they've been led by Cardell Patrick. He has the only interception of the season. This is an interesting game. I think A&M, obviously coming off of those last 2 weeks, taking a step back into FCS competition against a team in Austin Peay that just hasn't had any success. I want to lean A&M on this game because I do think the offense has been pretty sharp. They just, for whatever reason last week, they just couldn't really capitalize and score, but they did move the ball pretty well in that game. When you look at what his team did last week, they ran for 252 yards and they threw for 263. So they moved the ball extremely well in that game. They just couldn't get out of their own way and score. So that they have to be better at scoring points. And I think this is a game that's gonna get a high point total because Austin Peay has given up a lot of points in their games, and I think A&M's offense can score. I don't know how good A&M defense is gonna be against a similar opponent. So I'm gonna go with the A&M upset here. I guess you can call it upset. Maybe it's not. But I like A&M in this game, 27-24. I think the Bulldogs get them a road win out of conference. They need it. We all need it. So I think they have an opportunity to get it. And like I said, this game is a 6 p.m. kickoff, ESPN Plus in Clarksville, Tennessee. So if you want to watch that game, you can definitely check it out there. Our next game is Lamar and Texas Southern. Texas Southern is coming off of a bye week, as they last game was against Rice. Lamar, they've been a team who is kind of like a dark horse in the Southland. Their last SWAC opponent was against Valley. They won that game. It was a tight game for good stretches, but they were able to pull it out, and they're going to be a team to reckon with. The Cardinals coming to the game at 2-1. They lost to Texas State, beat Valley, and then they beat Weber State last week 17-16 in a hard fought home game against a ranked opponent. So they've been playing pretty solid football. Like I said, TSU is coming off of a bye week. They played Rice and beat Prairie View, so they come in at 1-1, which is a position they haven't been in a long time. But looking at what Lamar brings to the table, the Cardinals, they've been a team that pretty consistent offensively, 24 points per game. Opponents 21.3. They average 158 yards per game on the ground, 4.4 yards per carry, and 3 touchdowns. Opponents 144 yards per game on the ground, 1 touchdown, 3.8 yards per carry. When Lamar goes to the air, they average 211 yards per game, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Opponents also 6 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, 221 yards per game. 370 yards per game for the Cardinals, 5.8 yards per play, 9 touchdowns, 5 yards per play for the opponents, 365 yards per game, and 8 touchdowns. They convert 40% on third down and 57% on fourth down. They have 4 sacks. They have not fumbled the ball at all. They've taken care of the ball pretty decently. Only 2 turnovers on the season. The opponents 43% on third down and 55% on fourth down, and they have 10 sacks. So they have struggled with protecting the quarterback a little bit as an offense. Kalen Griffin averages 119 yards per game on the ground, 359 yards on 60 carries, 6 yards per carry with 2 touchdowns. Robert Coleman leads the offense through the air with 34 completions, 78 attempts, 514 yards, 4 touchdowns with 2 interceptions. His leading receiver is Savon Reed. He has 9 catches for 136 yards and 3 touchdowns. Also, Ja'Cory Hyder has 6 catches for 130 yards, average 21 yards per catch and 1 touchdown. He does have a 63-yard reception. Defensively, DeJuan Lewis leads the team with 24 tackles. Also, Christian Pugh has 22, and Braden Faulkner has 20, along with Ken Savannah. They have 5 guys with at least 20 tackles. Ramon Stevens also has 20 tackles. When it comes to tackles for loss, Jamon Jackson leads with 3. He also leads the team with 1.5 sacks, and they have 3 guys with 1 interception apiece. This defense has 18 tackles for loss. TSU, like I said, they had a really good game against Prairie View, and then a game that was a little worse than I thought it would be against Rice, but an expected outcome. But the way it got there was kind of not the way I was expecting it. They averaged 17 points per game, 39 allowed. They averaged 102 yards per game on the ground, 2.9 yards per carry, and 2 touchdowns. 175 yards per game on the ground for the opponents, 6.6 yards per carry, and 6 touchdowns. They are passing for 114 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. The opponents also had 2 touchdowns and 1 interception, 211 yards per game passing, 216 yards offense for the Tigers, 3.6 yards per carry, and 4 touchdowns. The opponents 386 yards per game, 9 touchdowns and 6.2 yards per play. Texas Southern 33% on third down, having attempted a 4th down. They have 5 sacks. The opponents 4 sacks. They're converting 30% on third down and 66% on 4th down. Danny Green leads the team with 22 carries for 99 yards and 2 touchdowns. Had a really, really great game against Prairie View. KJ Cooper, 19 of 29, 180 yards passing, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. He missed the Prairie View game. Jordan Davis was 8 of 13 in that game for 42 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. A leading receiver is Jaron Johnson with 5 catches for 54 yards, and AJ Bennett 2 for 53. Defensively, Canary Simmons has 17 tackles. Isaiah Bogarty and Keelan Cox have 2 tackles for loss apiece. Cox has 2 sacks, and the interception goes to MJ Henson. This game, I want to see TSU step up to the plate in this game. Lamar is going to be a tough opponent. They've been playing really well. They battled really tough against Texas State, and then they beat Valley and had a really good win against Weber State. So they've been kind of all over the place in terms of their production and wins. But I think they're going to be a tough task for TSU. TSU, if they can get their ground game going, I think that can help them a lot here. I do think the defense should be sharp. I think that defense is probably going to be the best part of the team. I think the offense is still young and still going to be hit or miss, but I think they're gonna find some ways to move the ball. I don't know if they're going to be able to score enough in this game. I think Lamar wins this game 28-12. I do think TSU will be game, but I don't think they're going to come up with it in this one. And that takes us to our last out of conference non-conference game, and that's Alcorn taking on McNeese. Alcorn, they picked up their first victory of the season against Edward Waters. It took them a little while to get going, but they finally got going on offense late in the first half in this game, and defensively they really just held Edward Waters down, and they were able to get that victory. But this is a tougher task. McNeese is a team who has kind of been all over the place. They lost a early game to Tarleton State. They lost a game. They lost a game to Texas A&M. and they beat Southern, and then they beat Stephen F. Austin 28-24. So I don't really know exactly what this McNeese team is. They do have some ability. They do have some explosive guys. Consistency to me is the key, and I don't know if they're not there yet, but they do have some guys who are capable of hitting some big plays. They just have kind of been all over the place in a game like this. They come into this game averaging 20.5 points per game, giving up 27. They average 170 yards per game on the ground, giving up 201, 4 yards per carry, 6 touchdowns. Opponents 4.9 yards per carry and 7 touchdowns. They are passing for 191 yards per game, 5 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. The opponents 178 yards per game, 6 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. 361 yards per game on offense for the Cowboys, 5.5 yards per play, 11 touchdowns. The opponents 5.5 yards per play, 378 yards per game, and 14 touchdowns. They're converting 37% on third down and 77% on fourth down. They have 6 sacks. They've given up 6 sacks. They're giving up 7 sacks. The opponents 38% on third down and 57% on fourth down. When they run the ball, their leading rusher is Clifton McDowell, the quarterback. He has 167 yards, 4 touchdowns. Also, D'Angelo Durham has 138 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns, 4.5 yards per carry. And Kobe Mann has 107 yards and 3.8 yards per carry, along with Jashawn Barbie. He has 104 yards on the ground. So they have a pretty balanced rushing attack. They have 5 guys that have run the ball at least 24 times. So along with Trevante Citizen, they really mix up their backs in the run game. They rotate guys a lot, and all those guys are capable runners, as well as McDowell at quarterback. He's 33 of 53 passing, 588 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. The leading receiver is Jermichael Carter. He has 12 catches for 142 yards. Also, Jonathan Harris has 4 catches for 101 yards. And Matthew McAllister has 3 catches for 95 yards and a touchdown. They do have a couple of explosive, big explosive passes, an 84-yarder, a 54-yarder, 80-yarder, 54-yarder, and a 53-yarder, as they can hit big plays down the field. Micah Davey is a name that you should know on defense. You're going to hear that name all game if you watch this game. He has 39 tackles on the season, along with Boogie Sylvester. He also has 35 tackles, and Tristan Driggers has 32. So they have a pretty well-rounded guy, a group of guys on defense that can get to the ball, and they're all going to be around the ball all the time. Lewis has 3 tackles for loss, and he also leads the team with 2 sacks. Silvera has 1 interception along with Miles. Alcorn, like I said, defensively, Alcorn's been they've been close to where they've been. Offensively, they just haven't really got it going. They're averaging 13 points per game, giving up 34, 108 yards per game on the ground, 3.2 yards per carry, 5 touchdowns. The opponents, 5 yards per carry, 7 touchdowns, 227 yards per game. Again, like I said about Nichols, Alcorn has played 2 FBS games. And so their numbers are skewed a little bit. 138 yards per game through the air for the opponents, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Alcorn, 115 yards per game through the air, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions. 223 yards on the total offense for the Braves, 4 yards per play, 5 touchdowns, 13 touchdowns for the opponents, 366 yards per game, 5.5 yards per play. Alcorn is converting 24% on third down, 100% on fourth down, and they have 2 sacks. They've given up 6 sacks, and opponents are converted 44% on third down and 25% on fourth down. The run game has not been there yet for Alcorn. They showed some flashes in the Edward Waters game, especially Xavier Vaughn at quarterback. He has 128 yards on the ground, 5.1 yards per carry, and 4 touchdowns. They're going to need guys to step it up in the run game, especially in a game like this. Vaughn is the leading passer, 28 of 47 300 yards passing, no touchdowns, no interceptions. The leading receiver is Tyran Warren. He had a huge 46-yard catch against Edward Waters that put them in scoring position in the first half of that game. He has 4 catches for 97 yards. Also, T. Adams, 7 catches for 84 yards. Truck Griffin, 8 for 54 at the tight end position. Stamarion Edwards has 16 tackles. Kayvon Henderson has 15. Edwards also leads the team with 4.5 tackles for loss. And he's tied for the team lead with Brendan Gibson with one sack apiece. And they have 3 interceptions by McKelton, McLaurin, and McCall. So if your name starts with Mac, you get an interception for Alcorn. This is an interesting game. I just don't know offensively if Alcorn is there because McNeese defensively is not great, but they do have some guys who can make things hard for you. I think that McNeese running attack is going to power them in this game, and you know it's in Lake Charles, so that's also kind of a battle that you got to have a little bit there. I don't really know where I stand because, like I said, Alcorn just hasn't really shown me a lot offensively yet. You know, they've only had one non-FBS game so far, so they're still a huge work in progress. This game is on ESPN Plus, 7 o'clock kickoff if you want to watch it. I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game because McNeese hasn't really scored a ton of points, and Alcorn's defense is still pretty steady. I like McNeese in this game. I'm going to say 28-10. I just don't really have a lot of confidence in Alcorn offensively right now. I know they were my pick to win the West, so you know they're gonna have to kind of get it going at some point. But you know they haven't played a conference game yet, so they're not out of the woods there. So they still have an opportunity to make some things happen there. But I think McNeese pulled this one out. And our only official SWAC game of the week is this one, and it's Prairie View against Southern. Both teams come in at 1-2. They've looked completely different in all of the games. These two teams are like a portrait of inconsistency. So this game is going to come down to who can be more consistent out of the two teams. I think, you know, Prairie View does have an FCS win, which I weight higher than a D2 win, obviously. They had a battle against a Northwestern State team who got shellacked really bad the next week, but they won that game. It was sloppy, but they won that game. You can't take that away from them. Southern in their two FCS games has not looked good. Defensively against McNeese, Southern looked great. Last week against Jackson State, the defense got gashed on the ground for 201 yards. Had a horrible first half, giving up 23 points. 33 by the end of 3 quarters. Offense could not get going in the McNeese game or the Jackson State game. And they had a slow start against Savannah State. So this team just has not had a good start yet. It's imperative if you're Southern that you have a good start. They're averaging 21 points per game. They're giving up 21 points per game. Southern's averaging 95.3 yards per game on the ground. They did not run the ball well at all against Jackson State. 2.7 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns. Opponents 138 yards per game on the ground, 7 touchdowns, 4 yards per carry. Southern 294 yards through the air, 4 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. Opponents 107 yards through the air per game, 1 touchdown and no interceptions. Southern is averaging 389 yards per game, 8 touchdowns, 5.5 yards per play. The opponents 4.4 yards per play. 254 yards per game, 245 yards per game, and 8 touchdowns. Third down, Southern is at 46% and 33% on third down. They have 4 sacks. The opponents have 7 sacks, and they converted 50% on fourth down and 33% on third down. The difference for Southern is obviously the Jackson State game. That game really threw a lot of their stuff out of whack. Again, like I said, they didn't look great against McNeese, but they led their game for like 2 quarters. Before the dam opened up. Kobe Dillon is the leading rusher. He has 108 yards on the ground. And Kendrick Grimes is at 94 yards and a touchdown. Passing wise, Noah Biden is 33 of 65, 517 yards, 1 touchdown with 4 interceptions. He probably will be the starter as Xavier Tissett is battling an injury. I don't think he's going to go this week. So Biden should get the start. Chandler Whitfield, 12 catches, 159 yards, and 1 touchdown. Tyler Kirkwood has 4 for 137. 131, Jermaine Minor, 7 for 115. Dupree Fuller and Darren Morris both had 10 catches to lead the team. Defensively, Horatio Johnson has 19 tackles. Kelby Givens has 2.5 tackles for loss. And Herman Brister, Vincent Page, Jamarius Brown, and Cameron Plummer each have an interception. Prairie View, like I said, they come in off of a loss to Texas Southern, a loss at Michigan State this week, and they beat Northwestern State the week before. They're averaging 15.3 points per game. They're giving up 32. They're averaging 75 yards per game on the ground, 2 touchdowns, 2.3 yards per carry. Opponents 4.6 yards per carry, 153 yards per game, and 6 touchdowns. They have 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 207 yards per game. Opponents 209 yards per game, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, 282 yards per game for the Panthers, 4.5 yards per play, 4 touchdowns. Opponents 362 per game, 12 touchdowns, 5.8 yards per play. Prairie View is at 39% on third down, 50% on fourth down, and they have 2 sacks. The offense has allowed 10 sacks. Opponents 100% on fourth down and 41% on third down. The leading rusher is Connor Wisham. He has 29 carries, 107 yards, and 1 touchdown. Cameron Peters, 37 of 70, 514 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Shamar Savage has 13 catches for 204 yards and 1 touchdown. Averages 20.3 yards per catch. And Trajan Spiller also has 13 catches for 148 yards. This game is simple. Whoever can run the ball in this game is going to win this game. And if Southern's going to win it, they need to have they need to get off to a good start. Southern can't continue to have slow starts. Southern can't continue to allow opponents to make big plays while the offense is kind of feeling their way around. And Prairie View is kind of similar. They've given up big plays in all 3 games. I mean, Northwestern State had like a 71-yard play, 77-yard play on their first play from scrimmage. So they've hit big plays. Michigan State's had big plays. Texas Southern has big plays. Prairie View they have to find some consistency, and same thing with Southern. This is an important game, especially for Prairie View, because they've already lost 1 conference game. They can't afford to lose another. Southern, the margin of error is not as small. I mean, obviously you don't want to lose a conference game, especially the first one, but you're not out of the hunt if you were to drop this game. But Prairie View needs this game. They're gonna have to play with a sense of urgency. It's at home, so that I give them a little bit of an edge there. Other than that, this game is pretty even. I think it's gonna be a close game. I don't think it's gonna be a whole lot of points. I do go with PV because they're at home. I think they win this game 24-20, 24-22. I think it's gonna be a game that's not pretty at all, but I think the Panthers find a way to win it, and they escape at home. And that takes us to our final game of the day, and it's a SWAC game, but it's a non-conference game, and that is Jackson State and Grambling hooking up in Grambling. It's a 6 p.m. kickoff. Both teams come in at 2-1. Grambling had a huge win. Well, they had a big win against Texas A&M Commerce. They probably should have won this game a lot worse than they did. They won it in overtime. They had 6 takeaways, so they really probably should have had a bigger margin of victory. But a non-conference on the road win, you don't trade those for anything. They still are kind of trying to find their way as an offense. They have some capable guys, but they just haven't executed. And it's going to be a tough task for them. They're averaging 27 points per game. They're giving up 29, averaging 84.7 yards per game on the ground, 84.3 yards per game on the ground, 3 touchdowns, averaging 3.2 yards per carry. Opponents 4.4 yards per carry, 163 yards per game, 6 touchdowns, 206 yards through the air, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Opponents 263 yards through the air, 4 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. The ground has been good at taking the ball away. 290 yards of offense for Grambling, 5.1 yards per play. 11 touchdowns. Opponents also 11 touchdowns, 5.9 yards per play. 426 yards per game. Grambling, 31% on third down. They haven't attempted a fourth down. They have 5 sacks. Opponents 4 sacks, 33% on fourth down, 37% on third down. Trey Benson is the leading rusher. He has Trey Bradford. My mind is scrambled. Trey Bradford, 35 carries, 148 yards, 2 touchdowns, averages 4.2 yards per carry. Miles Crawley, 49 of 84, 595 yards, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. When he goes to the air, Javon Robinson leads the team with 9 catches for 192 yards and 1 touchdown. Also, Nick Howard, 8 catches, 116 yards on the season and 1 touchdown. Defensively, Andrew Jones, 27 tackles. He also has 4 tackles for loss. And Bryce Cage and Blake Davis and Patrick Marshall have 1 sack apiece. And Brendan Barley leads the team with 2 interceptions. They take on a Jackson State team who had a really good first 3 quarters against Southern. And I feel like they kind of took their foot off the gas more than anything against Southern. If they would have kept their foot on the gas, who knows how many points they would have scored in that game. But they're averaging 35 points per game. They're giving up 17. They're averaging 148 yards per game on the ground, 4.8 yards per carry. Opponents 102 yards per game, 3.2 yards per carry. JSU 7 touchdowns rushing. Opponents 4. JSU 6 touchdowns through the air, 1 interception. 225 yards passing. Opponents 183 yards per game through the air, 3 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. JSU 373 yards per game. Total offense 13 touchdowns, 6.7 yards per play. Opponents 5 yards per play, 286 yards. Offense 7 touchdowns. JSU 47% on third down, no fourth down attempt converted. They have 9 sacks. The opponents 2 sacks, 50% on fourth down and 27% on third down. This defense has been playing really well all year. They got J.D. Martin and Herb Mulligan back. Add that to Ahmad Miller, Travis Terrell. And, they have a really great backfield. Right now, Cam McCoy is leading the team with 130 yards. He did get banged up against Southern, but he has 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. Ahmad Miller, 95 yards and 2 touchdowns. Herb Mulligan, 51 yards and 1 touchdown. Jacobian Morgan, 44 of 60, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, 531 yards. Jonas Fortillion, 7 catches, 149 yards and 2 touchdowns. Isaiah Spencer, 9 for 148 and 1 touchdown. Marvin Landy at tight end, 7 catches, 124 yards and 2 touchdowns. Kobe Paul, 6 for 49 and a touchdown. Terrell, 6 for 45. They have spread the ball around through the air. Defensively, Reed Pulliam, 18 tackles. Joshua Nobles, 4 tackles for loss and 3.5 sacks to lead the defense. Also, Sayers Guthrie, Shamar Hawkins, Kevin Wiggins, Demonier, Lacey each have 1 interception. I think this is an interesting game. It's in Grambling. Strange things happen in the hole. But I think JSU gets this dub here because I think their offense is further ahead than Grambling's offense. I think the defense is going to be able to make some plays, get some takeaways. Grambling can force turnovers. So if JSU is sloppy with the ball, Grambling can give themselves a chance. I do like Trey Bradford and Hargrove as running backs. Miles Crawley is still a good quarterback. He hasn't had a really great start this season, but he's still a solid quarterback. They have some guys at receiver who can cause JSU some problems. But I love that JSU run game, and I think if they can run the ball like they did last week, I think that gives them the edge. I think it's gonna be a battle, man. I think it's gonna be. I'm gonna say 28-21 Jackson State. I think they get the win, and that's gonna do it for this show. I thank y'all for tuning in, and y'all make sure y'all come back tomorrow for SWAC Smoke, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern, and we recap all these games on Sunday. And I don't know when I'm gonna drop it. It'll probably be sometime in the afternoon, but week 4 recap coming at you on Sunday. I'm your tour guide signing out, and I will catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.